Hi everyone, Robyn here from Gardening with Mama Bird. Well, today is 2 weeks and I return back to the classroom to teach the end of my summer break, and it's almost a year that I've been here on YouTube and posting videos, and I have to say I've pushed my comfort zone as far as talking in front of a camera and also learning so many new pieces about technology and how YouTube works. It's been a huge learning curve for me, but I am enjoying the process and having fun with it. And I have to say, my motivation comes from you watching and interacting with me on my channel, and I am so appreciative for that, and I thank you for that. I also love watching all the other YouTube channels of gardeners who have a passion for gardening, and I glean so much inspiration from them as well. So this is the view from my patio window as I come out onto my patio, and I think this is one of my favorite views from the garden. The one thing I am missing, which I didn't get on video this year, are all my hydrangeas in bloom. Instead, my backyard has more greenery in it than it does as many blooms this year, but I've still enjoyed it when I've been able to get out here and spend some time in it. I never know where I want to start when I do these tours, but let's get started over here. On my back patio, I have a Japanese maple tree, which soon at some point will go into the garden. But when I bought it, it was so small, I just thought I'd put it on the patio and get some growth and some strength on the trunk before I place it into the garden. Down below it, I have some hosta, which is finally sending out some decent sized leaves. And then I have some begonias. These begonias are just sitting in here in pots because I purchased them just prior to the heat wave and needed to keep them happy in a location in the garden. Then over here, I have some salvia. This has already been cut back once. It grew up taller than it is right now. It was full of blooms. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I cut it probably down to a third of it, and it's already flushed back out. Over here, I have this rose, which was a grocery store rose. And I think that's the most blooms I've ever seen on it. And I've had it for several years. I gave it a different fertilizer, and I can't remember what I gave it. I need to remember because it seems to be super happy. Below that, I planted Brunnera last year, so it had some time to establish itself. And I was really disappointed with how much the bugs love these. I've tried different things that are pet friendly because the dogs are back here, and these have a new flush of greenery. You can see they did a little bit better this go around. This didn't get so much of a reflush, and you can see what damage I don't know, I'm thinking it's maybe earwigs because I haven't found any snails in the backyard like I find in the front yard. So I'll keep working on that, and hopefully I can get it all figured out. Above this, I have a barberry shrub, and early spring, I actually took out one of them. I had 3 of them grouped together, but I removed one of them because I wanted to add over here the Wilma Goldcrest Cypress to add some more variation of green back in here. Down below, I have a hydrangea, and I purchased these 2 hydrangeas. There's one actually sitting out front because they're smaller variety, and I thought I was getting a wee bit grumpy and a wee bit giddy. Wee bit giddy is pink, and the tags were not marked correctly on them, so I have 2 purples. But I'm noticing that this one right now has a little bit of a pink flower coming out on it, and then if you look back here, there's more of a purple. So I'm not sure if I can get this Proven Winners wee bit grumpy to look more like a wee bit giddy one. I decided to keep them and find them a place in the garden. Then as you can see, back in this area, I have just a couple pots back there as holding plants. It got so hot, I had to move things into a little bit shadier of an area to keep them happy and not lose them. So I still have work to do in this flower bed. It has changed many times over the years, and it will continue to change. Then as I move back a bit, this is another Japanese maple. It's just your basic Japanese maple that can tolerate more sun. I purchased it as a very small one, and so it's grown up quite nicely in the yard, and I'm super happy with the shade it provides against the house. Then I'm going to turn around here. I won't go too fast. And on this side, I have my podocarpus. These are the more columnar type green plants. They are evergreen, and you can look and see they like full sun, and I think it's more the soil than the sun, but the ones on this end struggled a little bit, and as you move this way where there's a little bit more shade and they may have gotten a little bit more water, they're much fuller. This year, for the first time, I have had just a ton of spiders, and all of my plants in the garden are just covered. Sometimes I feel like it's almost prepping for Halloween. I don't know if you can see it in there. The webs are on everything, and I just come out here and hose them off with water. So that has been a little bit of a challenge this year with the spiders. Oh, and as you can see back there, the fly bag. We've had a tremendous amount of flies here in my area. I don't know if you struggle with that as well. Also along this line, I have my 4 hydrangeas, and they all get different variants of sun and shade. This one down here, it only got 1 bloom this year. The other challenge I've had with them this year is chlorosis. So I've been out here and given them some iron. They got 1 good dose about a week ago, and you can see that the leaves are already improving, but there's still some yellowing. So I gave it a little bit more, and I'll continue to watch them. I have just this 1 bloom on here. It did have quite a few blooms, and it was a beautiful pink tone. This one down here, it was a mix of very light purple and lavender colors, and it was probably the fullest of all of them. This one over here, it got a few, and they were pink. And look at, I have someone in there taking a nap, and I want him to sting me. Then I have another little friend up here posing and watching me closely. So I have lots of little friendly pollinators within the garden. Speaking of spiders, I have had this web in my backyard. Let me see if I can get it to where you could see it on the camera for probably a month now. And this spider, if I take it down, it just rebuilds it. So I guess it's staying there for a while. I just find it fascinating how spiders can so quickly build something that is so intricate. Then I want to turn around here and talk about my crepe myrtle. This is a white crepe myrtle. I don't remember the name of it, but I specifically went for this one because of the size and shape, and placed it in the center of my yard so it would pretty much fill in the area between the fence and the house. I do have to prune on it just a little bit to keep it from going over the gutters, and they don't plug up the gutters, but it offers a great canopy of shade here. The only thing that I would warn you about is it can be quite messy. So if you don't mind all the little petals from the flowers, then it's a great option to have in the yard. And it's super pretty. It's always filled with pollinators, and my hummers love hanging out on their little swing. I recently had to move the hummingbird feeder from the shepherd's hook over here to get more adequate shade during our hot temperatures. But I really enjoy watching the hummers on the swing. They just love that little swing. Now I'll take you over to this area. I think it's been maybe 2 years, maybe a year and a half, that I put in this little no-dig fence, and I did that to separate this back area so I could play with some different varieties of cut flowers. And then I took this border that was in my front yard, and it bordered all my grass but it was super frustrating for me to mow around. So I took it out and I cut them in pieces and built myself a little path down here until I can spend some time out here and change it up with maybe a different type of medium. I think I'm going to do stone like I have out front. But this year I just did a few little zinnias. Those were put in late, backed by some cosmos, and I'm super excited to see that bloom. They haven't bloomed yet because they did go in late, but they're a double click. And I had a seed fall out of a packet that grew and bloomed from just your basic type of cosmos. Fell in love with it so much that that's what I bought to put in the garden this year. And then down here I have, which are slow to grow, some milkweed and calendra, which I've never planted. And there's some insect living on that. So they haven't grown much. They've been pretty slow. And over here, it's kind of a holding area for a few plants that I don't know what to do with. Up here, I have my lilac tree from Proven Winners, and it looks like it's trying to get a second bloom on it. The color is really pretty, and I just love the fragrance. It hasn't been a prolific bloomer, so maybe I need to do a little bit more research for fertilizing it to make it a little bit happier. And over in this area, I have this sitting here. I had it on the ground, and something during the night came and ate all the little tops off of the ones that had come up. So I propped it up on a table so I don't lose any more of those. This bed here is getting a lot more shade from my jacaranda, which is one of my favorite plants in the garden. It has such a ferny texture to it. And you know, here in California, most of the ferns, or all the ferns that you get, they need to be in shade or they're not happy at all. So it's wonderful to have something that has such a fern-like texture be in the garden. And then let me see if I can find a flower on here so you can see up close. This year it has a lot more flowers than it did last year, but they're a really pretty purple tubular type flower. The pollinators love it. You can see up there I have some spent blooms, or maybe you can't see, but they drop down in there. This tree, or shrub, I should say, I have a tree out front, has grown in really nice. The purpose for this was to soften up the wall of the home, and also when you're over in this part of the garden looking this way, I don't see my ugly air conditioner. And then down here, I've used this for a cut flower garden, but because the jacaranda is providing so much shade, it's becoming less and less useful for this type of gardening. So I moved a few things out here in the sun to give those a try, but this area will probably start seeing some changes and maybe be planting up with some more permanent type plants to fill in on this side of the garden bed. I thought I'd move over here and show you what the jacaranda looks like from this viewpoint. And it was supposed to get 9 foot tall, and you can see it's already growing up above the gutter line. So it's exceeding the 9 foot tall range. So it must be really happy in this corner, which I'm glad because I love it. So now I'm going to take you over to the patio area of my garden. And this was all here when I moved in, this entire concrete area. And the people who moved into this home, the initial owners, they didn't want any gardening to do. So they left a very small, maybe 1.5 foot border of soil around the garden. So it's been a challenge for me to work in that small of a space, but I'm getting there. It's trial and error. Here I have a fountain that does not work. It actually needed a base at the bottom to hold a reservoir of water to be able to pump up and make it a useful fountain, which I have never had. So I've just played with succulents in it. And I think the top tier has been the most challenging. It's shallow, and I have not had any success with anything growing in there very well. Over here, I have a gardenia. This year, it had a ton of blooms. I really enjoyed them. The blooms seemed to last longer than typical. And then over on this little stretch, I have a little shrub, which the name of them is totally leaving my mind right now, but it's a great boxwood alternative. They are easy to care for. You can shape them. They actually need more sun than they get in my garden right now. If they have more sun, they're a lot fuller. And I notice since they do get a little bit of shade, I can see a little bit of woodiness inside. So they do much better in full sun. And if you need a boxwood alternative, these are awesome and easy to take care of. Over on this area, I have a project in mind, which I hope to get to in the next day or two, to refresh this area. It needs a little bit of work to look a little bit happier. But above that, I have a xylosma tree, which is growing in quite nicely, and it needs some pruning already, but it gives me some shade because this side of the yard is, what do I want to say, southwest facing. So in the afternoon, it's one of the hottest areas, and it shines right under the patio. So that xylosma tree gives me a little bit of break from the sun. Along here, I have my bower vine, and I have two trellises that it's growing on. One is an arch trellis, and the other one is a square one. And the arch trellis is under there, and then the square one comes along here. So I extended it to soften up the fence line a little bit. The blooms on it are really pretty. The bees love it. And it would have a lot more blooms if it was in full sun. But it gets some shade over here, so I don't get as many blooms, but I do get a lot of greenery from it. And here on the patio, I don't have the tag on that one to tell you the name of that Japanese maple, but this is a maple I bought that doesn't get too large, but can acclimate to full sun. So I have it here in a small pot to get it to be a larger tree before I decide to put it out into the landscape somewhere. And then over here on this area, I have a few plants that I'm just holding out to figure out where they need to go in the garden. And this one, poor thing, it fell over and landed in a sunnier spot when it was sitting out in the garden when I was trying to decide if I liked something there, and it got kind of scorched. Over here, I have some plants just hanging out, ready to go in the landscape. It's just waiting for the weather and the time to be able to incorporate them into the yard. Then over here on the patio, I have my plant shelf. I haven't done much with that this year. I've just tried to keep everything happy in the heat and move some plants over here so they get protected from the hot sun, and just trying to just keep them all happy. I did have a few house plants that were doing okay, but not great inside the home. So I moved them out here to the patio, and this one, actually this whole pot, they are super happy out here, and they're doing so much better outside than inside. So I'll just have to keep an eye on this one as the temperatures change and the weather gets cooler to make sure it continues to be a happy out here, because I really like the growth on it and how well it's doing. I also got my water fountain going because the birds like to come in here during the hot weather and make use of that, and it's also great listening to the sound of water back here. So I think that about does it for my backyard garden tour for the month of July. I missed a few months where I had a few blooms in the backyard, but everything is looking nice out here, and I'm super excited that the weather has turned to the cooler temperatures, and as you can see, we got a little bit of a breeze going on, so it's very pleasant to be able to spend some time out in the garden. Thank you so much for watching and joining me on my gardening journey, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you, and bye-bye.